We also want to draw your attention to the unprecedented fiscal recklessness of the Obama administration as depicted by the real-time national debt clock shown here in the arena.
The national debt clock unveiled by RNC President Reince Priebus this afternoon will lord over the RNC in Tampa, taking off the debt incurred during the convention and intended by organizers as a constant reminder of our country's spending problems. Shades of 1992, right, Steve?
You got it.
When the economy was the number one financial issue. Number one, fiscal growth, fair trade, deficit, debt burdens. Those are the foremost topics. And candidates were forced to address them head on. That was 20 years ago. Since then, federal debt quadrupled. In the guest spot today, David Walker, who recently co-wrote an op-ed for USA Today on the debt with Ross Perot, a candidate at 92. Walker is the president and CEO of the Comeback America Initiative, who's about to embark on the $10 million a minute bus tour, educating the public on the problems of our current debt crisis. David, thank you for being here.
Good to be with you.
David, what are you trying to accomplish in this tour?
Well, first, I noted that the Republican National Convention is using the national debt clock. Frankly, that lowballs the problem. We had delivered to our offices today the new U.S. financial burden barometer. It's over $70 trillion and growing by 10 million a minute, because the national debt clock doesn't count unfunded pensions, retiree health care, underfunded Social Security, Medicare programs, etc. And so we need to recognize reality that we're not exempt from the laws of prudent finance. We're trying to force these candidates to deal with more substance and solutions about what are they going to do to get the economy going, to generate more jobs, and to put our finances in order. Because whoever can convince the American people that they can do the best on those three things will win.
David, I think I want to challenge the premise of what you're doing here a little bit, because I think some people can make a case, a pretty strong case, that it's not really a deficit crisis that we have right now. It is a jobs crisis, and it is a demand crisis in the economy. It's people who don't have money because they don't have jobs, or they're afraid of losing their jobs and they're not spending money. And if you could get the economy moving by getting people spending their money again, then you'd have a windfall of revenue, and the picture wouldn't look nearly as bleak when you start talking about deficits. And I'm looking at, interest rates on government bonds are kind of ridiculously low right now, which to me says if you have a demand crisis and you have those basically non-existent interest rates, isn't this the time for government to be spending more money and not to be worrying in the immediate short term about deficits, but to be stimulating the economy through spending so that you get demand up and you get spending going again and you get revenue coming in?
We have a short-term problem and we have a structural problem, and we need to deal with both. In the short term, we've got to get economic growth up. We've got to deal with our unemployment and underemployment challenges. And yes, that can justify additional targeted investments that are properly designed and effectively implemented, even if they exacerbate the deficit in the short term, as long as they are coupled with a clear, credible, concrete, and enforceable plan to deal with the large and growing structural deficits that lie ahead that are driven by demographics and healthcare costs. By the way, on comparable, full and fair accounting, there's only one country in Europe that has higher total government debt to GDP than we do, and that's Greece. And we don't want to follow their example.
But, David, let me ask you about that. I mean, I don't disagree with the idea we've got a short-term jobs crisis, and in the long term, we've got a structural trajectory issue, as you said, driven by rising health care costs that we need to get under control. But I wanted to read part of your op-ed that you wrote with Ross Perot about the Comeback America Initiative, and you say, the purpose is to engage voters on these critical issues by stating the facts, explaining the stakes, outlining the tough choices we face, and discussing a range of nonpartisan fiscal reforms that should be able to gain bipartisan support, all in the name of keeping America great and the American dream alive. Now, my question is, you say these are reforms that should be able to gain bipartisan support. But if you look back, I mean, healthcare reform, the ideas for that were Heritage Foundation ideas. It should have been able to gain bipartisan support. Even cap and trade was really a market-based solution that should have been able to gain bipartisan support. When you have Republicans who say they will not accept a deal that is 10-to-1 spending cuts to tax increases, is the problem really one of pushing solutions, or is the problem one of having a just completely intransigent party that doesn't want to govern?
Republicans are in denial about the need for additional revenues. They're right that our problem is primarily a spending problem, The government's grown too big, promised too much, and waited too long to restructure, but it's not too late. Most of the problem is going to be addressed through reduced projected spending, but we're going to have more revenues than the historical average. How you achieve that matters, and when you achieve it, we should do it through comprehensive tax reform. And basically, in this tour, we're going to try to help people understand what the key principles are that are necessary to get bipartisan support.
I hear what you're saying there, David, but how do you break that logjam? I mean, how do you convince Republicans that it's in their best interest to work across the aisle and to compromise?
Two ways. This is not a partisan issue. The truth is that President George Walker Bush was fiscally irresponsible, and frankly, so was President Barack Obama. The burden barometer has gone up $50 trillion in the last 12 years. You have to do two things. One, the president, whether it's Barack Obama's second term or Mitt Romney's first term, has to demonstrate extraordinary leadership and has to be able to help people understand that we've got to make tough choices on the budget, on spending, on social insurance programs, and on taxes. Has to lay out a way forward that is credible, that meets certain principles. And then the American people, we the people, have to put pressure on our elected officials to work with the president in a constructive way to try to help solve this problem, to defuse this ticking time bomb. We have to make the political price associated with doing nothing greater than the political price of breaking irresponsible pledges and also making tough choices to help create a better tomorrow. That is possible. I've been in 49 states. Nobody has talked to more Americans. Nobody's done more town hall meetings. Nobody's talked to more editorial boards about this. It's possible. We just need leadership.
Got to come from the people, right, David?
Absolutely.
All right.
We the people.
Thanks, David.